margin
Absolutely.
to
West
independence.
Street, yeah, absolutely. So they're losing seats to this, and I do believe that's one of the reasons that Jess Phillips, who's the minister responsible in the Home Office for calling for a national inquiry, is rejecting this.
That's appalling. That is putting a political career in front of young girls who are still being targeted in these towns.
Oh, I would argue that Labour have played politics with this for far too long. They've done similar in relation to the Middle East. It's not unusual, I have to say, for them to play politics with highly sensitive issues. And
do you think the fact that we're so obsessed with not mentioning, the ethnic background and the religion of the majority of men involved in these gangs is because we're so worried about blowing the myth of this multicultural society that we're all meant to believe is a wonderful and beneficial thing? Yeah. And we're worried about revealing the truth that actually it's pretty rotten at its core.
Yeah, that's why the prosecutions weren't made. That's why the policing didn't take properly at the time that it should have done. There's no doubt about that. It was all about supporting multiculturalism. Peter Fay, after the Rochdale grooming scandal, straight after, came to Rochdale Town Hall for a public meeting and said some of the first words he said was, "I've come here to celebrate multiculturalism." The insensitivity of saying that to the community is incredible. It's not surprising that I call for his resignation.
So, I mean, obviously, this the front page of the Daily Mail today, Starmer is as guilty as anyone over the grooming gangs. I mean, considering how guilty some people are who are involved in this, are very, very strong words from Maggie Oliver.
Yeah, that's from Maggie Oliver. I agree with her. He was the Director for Public Prosecutions from 2008 till 2013. He only got involved in 2012 in the Rochdale grooming scandal, so there were 4 years before that when grooming was quite clearly going on. And Keir, the Labour MP in Keighley, called it out many years before.
Yes, okay,
yeah, absolutely. So there's been one or two whistleblowers. Not many parliamentarians, I have to say. Sarah Champion, credit to her, in Rotherham, and Keir, one or two others. But it's been around for many years, and he could have took more action sooner. And I think that's probably the point that Maggie's making.
Do you think the girls will ever get justice, the justice they deserve?
I think we're on the cusp of getting an independent inquiry, an inquiry that's different from ever before. But we have to stay focused. People are talking about Elon Musk, they're talking about Tommy Robinson, they're talking about Katie Hopkins. Let's focus on the victims. This inquiry is about the victims and nobody else.
Who are, many of them are supporting the fact that Simon Danczuk, thank you very much. OK, let's bring the panel in on this one. And you have your say. This is such an important story, gbnews.com/your say. Now, we have a Labour Party activist, Chris Worrall, and Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. I'm going to come to you first on this one. Chris, what do you make of what you've just heard Simon say, what you've seen Maggie say about Keir Starmer? What do you make of the whole thing?
Well, look, Dawn, I mean, as a father of a young daughter, when I read these accounts, it does make you sick, and you kind of think about what you'd do if you were one of the parents. But
well, interesting point you made, though, because many of the dads, and you talk as a dad, went to the houses where their girls were being held and raped, and the dads were arrested. The girls were accused of being drunk and disorderly.
Yeah, and let's get to that. I think, Labour's ambition now is to halve violence against women and girls over the next decade. When Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions, he called for mandatory reporting, so it's illegal to turn the blind eye to that. We've had a wasted decade. So I didn't interrupt you.
Well, we had a wasted decade.
We had a wasted decade, right, of inaction by the Tory government, right? And we cannot be, when there is women and children and fathers getting arrested for turning up trying to get their kids out of that. We cannot be ignoring the fact that Tories wasted a decade. What did Keir Starmer do? Right, there has been some changes while he was in as a DPP. Right, he immediately admitted the failures of that department, unlike other institutions, including the police, where they've had missing documents. So you can't even name the officers that held some of these cases. You've had, a huge review that the CPS changed things like victims' right to review where the CPS didn't prosecute. He brought that in. You had 80 specialist prosecutors be put in place, so actual specialists were dealing with these cases. And then the guidelines he's put in were commended by the Tories, the Secretary of State for Justice, the Attorney General, Theresa May, the inquiry, where they said it's extraordinary changes, so it's a model for other institutions. So now, The Labour Party is committed to implementing the last 7-year, £100 million inquiry at ICSA. We say we haven't got one. Do we want to wait over 7 years? My child might be at the age that could be groomed by that point. I'm not waiting for that. So the Labour Party is going to be putting in the place recommendations from the ICSA inquiry, and they're going to be putting in the mandatory reporting, which the Tories failed to do.
Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I do, actually. Mandatory reporting could have been implemented from day one. They've made loads of decisions, but they haven't done it yet. So we'll wait and see. But the truth is, Starmer has a very poor record as Director of Public Prosecutions, whether we're talking about Jimmy Savile, whether we're talking about
We're talking about child grooming,
Well,
Simon.
you were determined not to interrupt. We're talking about sexual abuse. He has a poor record on Jimmy Savile, on Al Fayed, and on grooming. The national inquiry is what people are calling for. So
We've had one, 7 years.
So that that was on historic abuse. That was about Westminster and historical cases. This is about the victims now. I tell you what, Chris.
9 reports of
if you're so determined,
15 investigations.
If you're so determined to make a positive impression, why don't you, on behalf of Labour, now apologise for how Labour have behaved in relation to these?
Simon. We haven't got someone that's like throwing out the Labour Party, giving it beans about the Labour Party. Stick to the facts.
Labour have ignored this and are culpable in terms of trying to brush it under the carpet. Why don't you apologise on Labour's behalf? Why don't you apologise on Labour's behalf?
Disgusting. Don't be giving me none of that. You want to take the gloves off?
I'm happy to take the gloves off. The truth is, people like Tony Lloyd, Jim Dobbin...
You can have your problems with them.
Yvette Cooper and others have ignored this subject and allowed it to be brushed under the carpet because they were scared of losing votes. You should at least apologise for that.
They're implementing the recommendations of the ICSA report. They're bringing a mandatory reporting which has been ignored for 10 years, a wasted decade under the Tories.
OK, let's bring Henry, who is a Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Henry, let's...